Hey everyone. So, for my crisis case study, I chose to focus on an incident that occurred back in 2011 when 400,000 residents of Southern California experienced a prolonged power outage as a result of a windstorm that hit the area. And as you can imagine, windstorms are pretty rare in Southern California, but they're not unheard of. And the utility that was responsible for getting the power back up not only took a week to do so, but also didn't do a very good job of communicating the timeline of the outage to their customers. So I actually divided my case study into two phases. The first phase was the initial phase, and that was the utility's response to the stakeholders during the time that the windstorm was going on, the bad phase. And the second phase I called the postmortem, and those were the measures that the utility took after the fact to ensure that their crisis communications didn't suffer as much as they did during that 2011 San Gabriel Valley power outage. Okay, I'm going to use the remainder of my presentation to give you a brief background of the power utility that was involved in this crisis, which I'll just go ahead and name right now, Southern California Edison. Secondly, go over those two phases that I mentioned before, the initial phase and the postmortem phase, and go over what Edison did well and what they could have done differently in their crisis communications. And lastly, provide a sample message that Edison could have given to their customers to keep them a little more in the loop. Because in my opinion, their customers are their most important stakeholder and their most important public, and they really did fail them in this incident. So let's go ahead and take a look. Southern California Edison, or SCE, is a subsidiary of Edison International, which is a huge electricity conglomerate. As the largest power utility provider in Southern California, serving 14 million customers across a 50,000 square mile radius, many energy influencers feel SCE holds a monopoly over the power industry. If we decide to go with that theory, then I suppose we can see why SCE may not have an incentive to serve their customers to the best of their ability. However, SCE hired a third-party firm after the 2011 San Gabriel Valley power outage to evaluate their communications, so I don't necessarily think that SCE doesn't care about its customers and their feedback. The firm hypothesized, and I agree with their evaluation, that SCE had such a huge number of people working on the outage that the internal communications became convoluted. The amount of red tape and internal procedures related to the outage prevented the organization from acting quickly. Instead, in an effort to comply with the laundry list of protocols, SCE focused their attention on solving the problem of getting the power back up instead of paying equal attention to their outage communications, which were public facing, and their internal steps to get the power running again. I consider the initial phase to include the events that transpired between November 30th and December 7, 2011. These 8 days mark the duration of the power outage. From our Salnow and Seeger readings, there were 4 postures of verbal self-defense for organizations in crisis, and one of these really captured SCE's response during the initial phase. The justificative posture, which asks not only for understanding, but also for approval, was what SCE was seeking from its customers. SCE wanted people to understand the difficult predicament that they were in with the outage and expected customers to be satisfied with that explanation. Obviously, customers did understand that the outage was serious, but merely justifying the outage wasn't enough. They needed answers. Another not so good decision that SCE made during its initial response was misinforming its customers. SCE kept signaling on its website that the power would soon be up. 72 hours pass, then 4 days, then 5, and nothing. In reality, SCE was fully aware of the severe damage that the windstorm had caused and knew it would take several days to fix. SCE may have tried to prematurely appease its customers, but I think they could have avoided much of the backlash if they had just reported the severity of the situation from the beginning instead of leaving people wondering. The website was the only source people had to check in on the outage progress, and even that was outdated. Call centers were running, but there were so many calls that SCE set up an automated machine and failed to respond to all of their customer inquiries. So, not to worry, this story has a mildly happy ending. The good news is that after the outage occurred, SCE completed a full evaluation of its outage communications and came up with a few viable solutions to prevent another San Gabriel Valley incident from happening again. The post-mortem phase began in early 2012 when SCE actually began to implement some of the corrective actions mentioned in their evaluation. Among the changes was hiring a full-time social media and communication staff to run outage communications through the company's Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn channels. They also hired a separate agency to bolster its call centers and respond to customer inquiries 24/7. And finally, SE integrated its communication staff and in-field specialists quite extensively. Some of the integrated departments included the outage management system, energy management system, damage assessment teams, and of course, communications personnel. This combination of changes led to the launch of the Outage Center, shown here, which is a one-stop location to find the latest on power outages in SCE territory. Got an SCE outage? Well, there's an app for that. Overall, SC may have missed the mark with their initial response to the San Gabriel Valley crisis, but their follow-up corrective actions demonstrated a commitment to improving their outage communications. They even received a Social Media Icon Award in Twitter Crisis Management from PR News last year. The aftermath of the crisis, however, wasn't all sunshine and roses, as SCE paid an over $8 million settlement to the state of California because of their negligence with this incident. I do think they learned their lesson. As for the sample response, I'm not going to read the whole press release I wrote, but one of the main changes I think SE could have added to their first statement were specifics. How many people were affected by the outage? 440,000. When did they expect the power to be back up? Provide an honest answer and let customers know that they would need to make arrangements for the next few days. Lastly, they should have provided some tips and guidelines for how to navigate the week without power. Where could the public get a generator? How do residents find out the latest on outages in their area? And then, of course, they got to give their customers their power back.